The city was a symphony of hushed whispers and clinking ice, 1,000 secrets tucked into the pockets of tailored suits and the folds of beaded gowns. But in the opulent ballroom of the Everhart estate, the music had died, replaced by a ghastly silence that hummed with accusation. I stood on the periphery, a silk cigarette holder clutched in my gloved hand, the smoke curling around my perfectly coiffed bob like a halo of disdain. My name is Phryne Fisher, and unlike most women in 1920s Melbourne, I don't dabble in gossip. I dissect it. I peel back the layers of polite society to find the rotten core beneath. And tonight, the core was very, very rotten. Lady Eleanor Blackwood, a woman whose beauty had once been whispered about in the same breath as royalty, now stood pale and rigid, her usually vibrant emerald eyes wide with a terror that clawed at my own heart. They called her the Widow, a title that carried both respect and a certain pity after her husband, Captain Alastair Blackwood, was lost to the Great War's brutal maw. Tonight, however, the whispers were far less charitable. Poisoner, they hissed. Black Widow. The victim, if you could call him that, was a man named Sterling Vance, a prominent industrialist, a self-made titan of industry, and, as the city's rumor mill had it, Lady Blackwood's latest suitor. Now, he lay sprawled across a Persian rug, his face a grotesque mask of blue and purple, a half-empty champagne flute glittering ominously beside him. Cyanide, the doctor had muttered, his voice barely audible over the rising tide of hysteria. Inspector Robinson, a man whose intellect often lagged behind his ambition, was already chalking it up as an open and shut case. She was seen with him, Miss Fisher. She prepared the drinks. And she stands to inherit a considerable fortune if he was to propose. His words hung in the air, thick and cloying like the scent of fear. But I saw more than the obvious. I saw the tremor in Eleanor's hand as she gripped the arm of a velvet chair, not the tremor of a guilty woman, but of one caught in a nightmare. I saw the way her gaze darted to a small, silver locket nestled at her throat, a locket that held a miniature portrait of her late husband. Grief, patriotism, even a touch of forbidden love, these were powerful emotions, yes, but did they breed poisoners? I doubted it. My eyes, trained to see beyond the superficial, scanned the room. The grand chandeliers, dripping with crystals, cast 1,000 fragmented reflections. The mahogany panels gleamed, mirroring the shock etched on the faces of the assembled guests. A stray feather boa, dropped in haste, lay forgotten near a potted palm. And then I saw it. Tucked beneath the fringe of a heavily embroidered curtain, almost invisible against the dark fabric, was a single, shimmering emerald. Not a gemstone from a necklace, but rather, the kind of stone that might adorn a brooch. A brooch that, I recalled, Eleanor Blackwood was rarely seen without. Yet, tonight, her elegant black gown was unadorned, save for the locket. A cold dread trickled down my spine. The emerald brooch, I knew, was a family heirloom, a symbol of the Blackwood legacy. Why would it be hidden here, far from its usual place on Eleanor's person? Was it dropped in a struggle? Or placed there intentionally? I strolled over, my stride confident, my emerald green dress a defiant splash of color against the somber mood. Inspector, I purred, my voice a low, melodious hum that cut through the tension. Perhaps we shouldn't be quite so hasty to condemn a grieving widow. After all, appearances can be deceiving, can't they? Robinson, predictably, bristled. Miss Fisher, this is police business. Indeed, I replied, my smile unwavering, though my eyes were sharp as razors. And sometimes, the police need a little guidance. With a flick of my wrist, I scooped up the emerald. It was heavier than I expected, and as my fingers closed around it, I felt a tiny, almost imperceptible ridge along its edge. Not a flaw in the stone, but something else. A sudden, sharp gasp ripped through the silence. Eleanor Blackwood had collapsed, her elegant form crumpling to the floor like a discarded doll. Her maid rushed to her side, murmuring frantic words of comfort. But as they lifted her, something small and white fluttered from her grasp, landing at my feet. It was a letter. Or rather, a fragment of one. Handwritten, in a script I didn't immediately recognize. But what caught my attention was not the neat cursive, but the faint, almost invisible numbers scrawled in the margins, like forgotten annotations. Numbers that seemed to follow a pattern. A code. My breath hitched. This was no simple poisoning. This was something far more intricate, more insidious. The emerald brooch, the coded letter fragment, Eleanor's terror, it all coalesced into a chilling tableau. This wasn't just about a love affair gone wrong. It was about secrets, about a web of intrigue far grander than anyone in this ballroom could imagine. And Lady Eleanor Blackwood, the grieving war widow, was tangled right in its treacherous threads. The game, as they say, was afoot. And I, Phryne Fisher, intended to play it until every last secret was laid bare, no matter how dangerous the truth might be. The tension in the room, previously focused on Eleanor, now shifted, a palpable unease settling over the glittering facade of the Everhart estate. I could feel it, almost taste it, the promise of danger, the thrill of the chase. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. The story of the widow's secret was far from over, and I was about to dive headfirst into its treacherous depths. Chapter 1. The scent of dust and ancient paper hung in the air of the old Blackwood townhouse, a stark contrast to the cloying perfume and stale cigarette smoke of the Everhart ballroom. Lady Eleanor, now under house arrest and visibly shaken, sat huddled in an armchair, a half-empty teacup trembling on its saucer. Inspector Robinson and his men, like clumsy elephants in a crystal shop, were systematically tearing the place apart, their heavy-handed search a testament to their lack of finesse. "Eleanor," I said softly, my voice a balm in the chaos. I had persuaded Robinson to allow me to question her, a concession he granted only after I pointed out that his brute force approach was likely to destroy any evidence rather than reveal it. I offered him a deal. I would work alongside his men, but on my own terms. He, of course, reluctantly agreed, muttering something about a private detective's misguided intuition. "I didn't do it, Phryne," she whispered, her emerald eyes, once so bright, now clouded with despair. "He was kind to me, Sterling. He was a friend. Why would I?" Her voice broke. "I believe you," I replied, a simple statement that seemed to crack the dam of her composure. "The letter," she stammered, "the one that fell." "The fragment," I corrected, pulling the small, crumpled piece of paper from my clutch. "The numbers. What are they?" She stared at it, her brow furrowed. "I don't know. It was my husband's. A letter he sent me from the front. But the numbers weren't there before. I swear they weren't." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just espionage. It was a plot that had been simmering for years, a ghost from the past now reaching out to ensnare the living. "Show me the rest of his letters," I urged. Eleanor led me to a small, unassuming writing desk in the study. Inside a locked drawer was a collection of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Each one was a testament to a love caught in the crossfire of war, filled with loving words and nostalgic memories of home. But I wasn't looking for poetry. I was looking for patterns. I laid the letters out on the desk, my fingers tracing the familiar handwriting. And there it was. In the margins of a letter dated October 1917, another set of faint, handwritten numbers. 3-1-18-5. And on another, from November. 12-1-4-25. I pulled out my own notepad and pencil, my mind a whirlwind of possibilities. They weren't just random numbers. They were too deliberate, too organized. Could they be related to the text itself? The third word, the first letter? The 18th word, the fifth letter? It was a simple substitution cipher, a common tool for military communication, but used in a way that would be almost impossible to detect without prior knowledge. My heart hammered in my chest. If I was right, Alistair Blackwood hadn't just been a soldier, he had been a spy. And his coded messages were still being sent, years after his supposed death. But to whom? And what was their purpose? Suddenly, a loud crash from the library next door shattered my thoughts. Inspector Robinson emerged, holding a heavy, leather-bound volume. "Look what we found, Miss Fisher. Hidden behind a bookshelf. Looks like the dear captain had a taste for more than just a good book." He opened the cover to reveal a hollowed-out compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was a small, ornate key. A single letter, an A, was engraved on its head. My instincts screamed that this was no coincidence. The key, the coded letters, the poison, they were all pieces of a single, horrifying puzzle. But the pieces didn't fit together neatly. Why poison Sterling Vance, a wealthy industrialist, who seemingly had no connection to Alistair's past as a spy? "This changes nothing," Robinson grunted, slipping the key into an evidence bag. "It just shows that the widow was hiding more than a secret admirer. She was hiding her late husband's secrets, too. And who knows what she planned to do with them?" "On the contrary," I said, my voice sharp with sudden realization. "It changes everything." I looked back at the coded letters. The numbers, when I applied the cipher to the text, didn't form a coherent message. It was a jumble of letters. Nonsense. My theory was wrong. The numbers weren't a cipher for a message within the letter. They were a key themselves. A key to something else entirely. I turned back to the study, my eyes scanning the shelves, the furniture, the very air of the room. A spy wouldn't hide a code in a letter and then give you the key in a different room. The code and the key would be related. The numbers were not a cipher. They were a lock. A combination. The key with the wasn't just any key. It was a key to something specific. My gaze settled on an old, heavy-looking safe, its iron door blending in with the dark wood of a hidden cabinet. A safe that had a combination lock. A safe that had been overlooked by Robinson's men. A safe that was a complete dead end without the combination. But what if the numbers in the letters were the combination? What if the numbers were the key, and the key with it opened another, separate box? "Eleanor," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The emerald brooch. You said it was a family heirloom. Was there something special about it?" Her eyes widened, a flicker of understanding dawning in them. "Yes. My grandmother told me that the emerald was not just a stone. She said it was a secret keeper. That it was hollow, and that a tiny scroll could be hidden inside." My heart skipped a beat. A hollow emerald. The ridge I had felt. It all made a chilling sense now. Sterling Vance hadn't been poisoned for his money. He was poisoned for the emerald brooch. He must have taken it from her during their meeting, perhaps as a keepsake or maybe even as a first step to proposing. And something, a note, a clue, a key, was inside it. Something that Alistair had hidden and Sterling had unknowingly found. Something that had gotten him killed. But who would want the secrets of a war long past? And why? I was so close, I could almost taste the answer. But the brooch was missing. It wasn't in the ballroom. I had checked. It wasn't on Eleanor, and it wasn't on Vance. It was gone. The brooch. Who would have taken it? I asked, a sense of urgency flooding my veins. Eleanor's face paled further. No one. We were alone. But, wait. Gareth. Gareth. My neighbor. He was at the party. He seemed quite taken with the brooch, actually. He kept asking about it. He said he had a passion for antique jewelry. He was talking to Sterling Vance earlier that night, right before it happened. Gareth. The name echoed in my mind. A name that was once whispered about in hushed tones. A man known for his shady dealings and questionable business practices. He had been there, lurking in the shadows. Had he seen the brooch? Had he seen Sterling take it, and then, in a moment of pure opportunism, taken it for himself? A simple theft turned into a murder cover-up. It was a possibility. But something about it didn't feel right. It was too simple. No, this was more than a common theft. This was a conspiracy that stretched back to the war. The numbers, the key, the emerald brooch, and now Gareth, a man with a murky past. The pieces were all there, but the picture they formed was a grim and terrifying one. I had to find that brooch. And I had a feeling that the person who had it was not going to give it up easily. The plot was thickening, and I was about to dive headfirst into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with a killer who would stop at nothing to keep a war-torn secret buried forever. Chapter 2. The rhythmic beat of a jazz drummer and the sultry wail of a saxophone were a welcome change from the grim silence of the Blackwood townhouse. I had followed my hunch about Gareth to the city's most notorious speakeasy, the Crimson Clover, a den of sin and secrecy tucked behind a seemingly innocuous tailor shop. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey, sweat, and cheap perfume. I navigated the crowd with a practiced ease, my sequin dress a beacon of light in the smoky gloom. I found Gareth in a back booth, his face half hidden in the shadows. He was a man of unassuming demeanor, yet with eyes that held the hard glint of a predator. He was talking to a scrawny, nervous-looking man in a threadbare suit. My sixth sense, which had guided me through more than one perilous situation, screamed that this wasn't an innocent chat about business. I sauntered over, my smile as sharp as my wit. "Gareth, darling," I purred, my voice low and confident. "Fancy seeing you here. I'd heard you had a passion for antiques, but I confess I thought it was of the more respectable variety." He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by a veneer of cool indifference. "Miss Fisher. A pleasure, as always. But I'm afraid you've caught me in a moment of business." He gestured vaguely at his companion. "Oh, I don't mind. I have an appreciation for business of all kinds. Especially the kind that involves valuable family heirlooms," I said, my gaze unwavering. The small man beside him shifted uncomfortably, and Gareth's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I replied, my smile never leaving my face. "A certain emerald brooch, perhaps? A piece that seems to have gone missing from the Everhart estate, right around the time Sterling Vance met his rather unfortunate end." Gareth leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "I think you've had too much gin, Miss Fisher, and you're venturing into dangerous territory." "I do so love a good adventure," I said, and then, without a moment's hesitation, I lunged forward, my fingers snatching the lapel of the small man's jacket. A small, familiar object fell from his pocket, clattering onto the polished wood of the table. It was the emerald brooch. The scrawny man's eyes widened in terror. He looked from the brooch to Gareth, his loyalty crumbling under the weight of his fear. Gareth, in a flash of pure rage, knocked over glass, creating a diversion. He grabbed the small man and a brief, brutal scuffle ensued. In the chaos, the small man broke free, scrambling away into the crowd. I, in turn, snatched the brooch from the table. "This is not over, Fisher." Gareth snarled, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "I'm counting on it," I called back over my shoulder, holding the brooch aloft. He would not give chase in such a public place, not with so many witnesses. He was too clever for that, too much a creature of the shadows. I slipped out of the speakeasy and into the crisp night air, clutching the brooch in my hand. My heart was pounding, a thrilling, frantic rhythm. I knew I had to examine it immediately. I hailed a taxi and instructed the driver to take me to my house, a large, sprawling manor where I had a study equipped with all manner of tools for my curious hobbies. Once inside the safety of my study, I locked the door and placed the brooch under powerful magnifying glass. The emerald glittered, a magnificent, vibrant green. My fingers traced the tiny, almost invisible ridge I had felt before. Taking a small, sharp instrument, I carefully pried open the delicate clasp. It was hollow, just as Eleanor had said. Tucked inside was a minuscule, tightly rolled piece of parchment. My hands were trembling slightly as I unrolled it. The scroll was covered in a series of tiny, hand-drawn symbols. They weren't letters or numbers. They were something else entirely. They looked like a map, but a map of what? My mind raced, trying to decipher the cryptic symbols. As I stared at the parchment, a horrifying thought occurred to me. The brooch was a secret keeper, a vessel for information. The key with it that Robinson had found, the coded letters from Alistair, they weren't just clues. They were an intricate puzzle, a series of locks that led to something far more valuable than a mere treasure. They were a breadcrumb trail to a secret so dark it had been buried for years. And then I saw it. The same I had seen on the key, drawn next to one of the symbols on the parchment. It was a location. A specific location. The symbols, I now realized, were a map of the city's underground. There was a marker, pointing to a hidden vault, a forgotten railway station, or perhaps something even more sinister. A place where Alistair had stashed his secrets. The brooch had been the key, not just to a secret, but to the location of a secret. A secret that Gareth, and whoever he was working for, desperately wanted. They didn't just want to hide the truth about Alistair. They wanted whatever he had left behind. A sudden, sharp knock at the door startled me. My heart leapt into my throat. Who could it be? My butler, Mr. Butler, was an early riser, but it was far too late for him. The doorknob rattled, and a voice, muffled but distinct, called out, "Miss Fisher, open this door. We know you have it." It wasn't a policeman. The voice was too coarse, too dangerous. It was Gareth, or one of his thugs. They had followed me. I was alone, vulnerable, and they knew I had what they were looking for. I had just found the first piece of the puzzle, and now my life was in grave danger. I looked at the parchment in my hand, the cryptic symbols a stark reminder of the peril I was in. They would stop at nothing to get it. And I was not about to let them. I had to think quickly. My instincts, my intelligence, and my courage were all I had. And I had a feeling I was going to need every last ounce of them to survive the night. Chapter 3. The rattling of the doorknob was a hammer against my eardrums. I was trapped, a lone sparrow in a gilded cage. My mind, however, was a whirring engine of defiance. I couldn't outrun them, and I couldn't fight them off. But I could outsmart them. I looked around my study, a room filled with curiosities, books, and tools that I had collected over a lifetime of solving puzzles. My eyes landed on a large, heavy globe of the world, a hollowed-out piece that I used to store my most valuable documents. It was a ruse, a clever one at that, but I needed something more. My gaze darted to the window, a dead end with two large men blocking the only exit. No, escape was not an option. Deception was my only ally. I snatched the small parchment from the desk and, with a quick, decisive motion, slipped it inside a false book on my shelf, a seemingly innocuous copy of the history of the Roman Empire. I then took a blank piece of parchment, crumbled it to make it look old, and scribbled a series of nonsensical symbols on it, hoping it would be enough to fool them. I then tucked this fake parchment inside the emerald brooch. I had to make them believe they had found what they were looking for, only to discover, too late, that they had been outmaneuvered. The door splintered under a heavy blow, and two men, their faces grim and determined, burst into the room. They weren't from the police. Their brutish manner and rough clothing screamed underworld. They moved with the silent efficiency of seasoned thugs. "Give us the brooch, Miss Fisher," one of them grunted, his eyes fixed on my hand. I held it up, my hand steady despite the frantic pounding of my heart. "You'll have to be more specific. I have many fine pieces of jewelry." The other man, a hulking brute with a chipped tooth, scoffed. "Don't play games, lady. The emerald." "Ah, the emerald," I said, a slow, disarming smile spreading across my face. "You mean this one?" I held it out, and the hulking man reached for it. Just as his fingers closed around the brooch, I threw a handful of powdered ink from an old quill bottle into his face. He howled in surprise and pain, stumbling back as his partner moved to help him. In that brief window, I slipped the brooch into the palm of my hand, and then, with a flick of my wrist, I tossed it behind a large, ornate armchair. It landed with a soft, muffled thud. "It's over there," I cried, pointing dramatically. The two men, distracted and disoriented, charged toward the armchair, rummaging through the cushions. I used the precious seconds to make a dash for the door, but a third man, silent as a ghost, emerged from the shadows. He was smarter, more alert. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a steel vice. "Clever girl," he murmured, his voice as smooth and cold as ice. "But not clever enough." He pushed me back into the room, and I was forced to watch as they triumphantly retrieved the brooch. They found the fake parchment inside, their faces lighting up with a dangerous glee. They had no idea it was a decoy. "Now, where is the key?" the leader demanded, his eyes fixed on me with a predatory hunger. "The key with the dot." I feigned ignorance, my mind racing. The key was still with Inspector Robinson, and I had no intention of leading these brutes to it. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice trembling, a calculated act of weakness. "Don't lie to me," he snarled, a low, menacing sound. "Gareth said you were a smart woman. So tell me where it is, and this can all be over." "I told you everything I know," I insisted, but my eyes betrayed me, darting to the floor as if searching for something. He saw it. He saw the flicker of defiance in my gaze, the brief hesitation. He knew I was lying. He held up the parchment, a look of triumph on his face. "This will lead us to the vault. But without the key, we'll have to find another way in. And I have a feeling you're going to tell us what's in there." The tension in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. I had successfully fooled them with the parchment, but I was still their prisoner. They hadn't come for me. They had come for the secrets I had uncovered, and they would stop at nothing to get them. Just then, a loud, insistent knocking came from the front door of my mansion. A voice, clear and authoritative, boomed from the other side. "This is Inspector Robinson. Miss Fisher, I know you're in there. I have a warrant for your arrest." My heart sank. Robinson, in his infinite ineptitude, had chosen the worst possible time to pay me a visit. He was here to arrest me for interfering in a police investigation. But his arrival also provided a brief, chaotic opportunity. The three thugs exchanged nervous glances. They couldn't risk a confrontation with the police. Not with a faked warrant and a stolen brooch. "Let's go," the leader said, grabbing my arm. "We are taking her with us." They dragged me from the study, leaving the door ajar, the room in disarray. They half-carried, half-shoved me through the back of my house, toward a waiting automobile. I was a pawn in their dangerous game, a living key to a secret they were desperate to unlock. They had the coded parchment, but they still didn't have the whole story. I, however, had the truth. A truth that would not only exonerate Eleanor, but also expose a conspiracy that stretched far beyond a simple murder. And as the car sped through the dark streets of Melbourne, I knew that the real danger had just begun. I was no longer a detective on the hunt. I was the prey. And I had a feeling that the secrets I held were worth more than my life. Chapter 4. The car sped through the labyrinthine streets of Melbourne, a blur of neon signs and shadows. My captors, the silent thugs who had broken into my home, were professional, efficient, and chillingly apathetic. They didn't speak a word, their silence more menacing than any threat. I was being driven to a place that wasn't on any map, a place where the city's underbelly thrived in the dark. We came to a shuddering stop in a hidden alleyway, far from the polished elegance of the city's main thoroughfares. The air was thick with the stench of garbage and dampness. My captor, the leader with the icy voice, shoved me out of the car. I stumbled, but quickly regained my balance, my poise a defiant act against their brutality. We entered a large, unmarked warehouse, the heavy door groaning as it swung shut behind us. Inside, the warehouse was a grim tableau of forgotten industry. Dusty machinery stood like silent sentinels, and the air was filled with the low hum of a distant generator. In the center of the vast space, under the harsh glare of a single, bare light bulb, was Gareth. He sat at a makeshift table, a bottle of whiskey and a glass in front of him, his eyes like two chips of ice as they landed on me. "Miss Fisher," he said, his voice a low, mocking drawl. "I see you've decided to join us. I must confess, your parlor tricks were quite amusing. But now, it's time to be serious." "I'm always serious, darling," I replied, my voice steady, though a cold dread was beginning to set in. Especially when dealing with criminals who resort to breaking and entering. He chuckled, a short, humorless sound. "A minor inconvenience. Now, where is it? The key." I knew he wasn't talking about the key with the that Robinson had. He was talking about something else entirely. The coded messages from Alistair that I had seen. The numbers were not a cipher. They were a lock. A combination. The key with there was a part of it, but not the whole story. I had theorized that the numbers were the combination to a safe. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I lied, my gaze unwavering. "I'm sure Inspector Robinson would love to have a little chat with you about that." His smile vanished. "Don't play coy. We know you looked at Alistair's letters. We know you know what they mean." He gestured to the warehouse floor. "This is a map, Miss Fisher. A map of the city's underbelly. Tunnels, old subways, sewers, all of it. And somewhere, there's a vault. A vault Alistair built. The numbers are the combination. And the key with the air, well, that's something else entirely." I stood there, my mind racing. He was right. The numbers, the key, the emerald brooch, it was all leading to one place. A hidden vault. A place where Alistair had stashed his secrets. But what kind of secrets would a war hero have that were worth killing for years after the war had ended? "What's in the vault, Gareth?" I asked, a sense of urgency creeping into my voice. "What is so valuable that you would resort to murder?" He leaned back, a cruel glint in his eyes. "That, my dear Miss Fisher, is for me to know and for you to never find out. I have my connections. I know things. Things that a society woman like you could never comprehend. Alistair was a hero, wasn't he? A war hero. But what if he wasn't? What if he was a double agent? A traitor?" My blood ran cold. The thought was so shocking, so utterly unthinkable, that it took my breath away. Alistair Blackwood, a decorated war hero, a traitor? It was a vile accusation, one designed to disarm and demoralize me. But his confidence, the way he spoke, it was almost convincing. And Sterling Vance? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did he know? He didn't know anything, Gareth sneered. He was a fool. He stumbled upon the brooch, and in his greed, he took it. He had no idea what was inside. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He held up the fake parchment I had given him. This, however, is a problem. The symbols are wrong. I know my business, Miss Fisher. This is a fake. Where is the real one? I knew this was coming. I had prepared for it. Let's just say, the real one is somewhere you'll never find it, I said, a slow, defiant smile spreading across my face. Gareth's face, which had been a mask of smug satisfaction, contorted into a mask of pure rage. He lunged at me, his hand raised to strike, but before he could, the warehouse door burst open with a deafening crash. Inspector Robinson and his men, guns drawn, stormed the room. Gareth, you're under arrest. Robinson boomed, his voice a surprising mix of authority and relief. He had found the real brooch and the fake parchment, which had led him to me, believing I was in grave danger. My ruse had worked, but it had also led to my capture. Gareth's men, caught completely off guard, surrendered. Gareth, however, was not one to go down without a fight. He made a desperate dash for an exit, but two of Robinson's men tackled him, bringing him down in a flurry of blows and curses. I was safe. But as I watched them handcuff Gareth, a chilling thought struck me. He hadn't said that he was the one who had poisoned Sterling Vance. He had simply said that he knew where I was and that I had the key. Who, then, was the real murderer? And what were the secrets in Alistair's vault? The mystery was far from over. In fact, it had just gotten a lot more complicated. The real culprit was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to reveal my next move. And I had a feeling that they were watching my every step. Chapter 5. The air in the police station was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unwashed wool. Inspector Robinson, his face flushed with triumph, paced the interrogation room like a peacock, preening in the glow of his supposed success. Caught 'em all. Miss Fisher. Caught 'em red-handed. Gareth and his thugs. All of them. Case closed. I sat across from him, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Hardly, Inspector. You've only caught the men who broke into my home. The man who poisoned Sterling Vance is still at large. Robinson scoffed, his victory deflating like a punctured tire. Nonsense. Gareth hired those thugs to get the brooch. He's the one who wanted the secret. Ergo, he's the one who killed Vance. But he didn't, I insisted, leaning forward. Gareth said he knew things that a society woman couldn't comprehend. He wasn't talking about secrets, he was talking about connections. His offense, a black market operator. He heard about the brooch from someone who saw Sterling Vance with it. He wanted it for himself, a simple case of a treasure hunt gone wrong. He's a criminal, yes, but not a murderer. My mind flashed back to the warehouse, to Gareth's chilling words. Alistair was a hero, wasn't he? A war hero. But what if he wasn't? What if he was a double agent? A traitor? He had said it with such conviction, as if it were a long-held belief, a dark secret that he had stumbled upon and was now trying to exploit. But how could he have known this? Who was his source? Robinson's smug expression was replaced by a look of weary frustration. Then who? Miss Fisher. Who had a motive to kill Sterling Vance and frame Lady Blackwood? And what does any of this have to do with Alistair Blackwood being a traitor? The motive isn't about money, Inspector, I said, my voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. It's about the truth. The truth of what was in that vault. Alistair Blackwood was not a traitor. He was a double agent, yes, but not for the enemy. He was an agent for the British Crown, sent to infiltrate a German espionage ring operating right here in Australia. His death was faked, a ruse to get him out of the country and into deeper cover. The letters to Eleanor were a clever diversion, a smokescreen to throw off his enemies. Robinson's eyes widened in disbelief. That's preposterous. You can't possibly know that. But I do, I said, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper from my clutch. The numbers from Alastair's letters. I was wrong about them being a simple combination. I had forgotten the last letter. I've been a busy woman, Inspector. I went back to Eleanor's house and found the last letter, with a final set of numbers. When combined, the numbers form a date that coincides with a significant event during the war, an event that was never officially recorded. And the key with the It's a key to a safe deposit box at the Imperial Bank. The same bank where Vance had his office. The same bank where Alastair Blackwood had his. I watched as a slow dawning of realization spread across his face. You mean, you think Vance wasn't poisoned because of the brooch? He was poisoned because he stumbled upon Alastair's safe deposit box and opened it. Precisely, I said, a thrill of triumph running through me. The brooch was a distraction, a red herring planted by the killer to lead us astray. Vance was poisoned because he found the truth. And the killer is someone who has been protecting Alastair's secrets for years. Someone close to him. Someone who would have known exactly where to look for the key to his safe deposit box. Someone who would have a motive to kill both Vance and now, me. Robinson's face paled as he considered my words. But who? Think, Inspector, I urged him. Who else would have a motive to protect Alastair's secrets? Who would have the means to poison a man in a crowded ballroom and then vanish without a trace? Who would know that Alastair had a safe deposit box at the Imperial Bank, and that the key to it was hidden in a hollowed-out book at his home? His eyes darted around the room, as if the answer was written on the walls. And then, in a moment of utter clarity, he said a name that sent a chill down my spine, a name that made all the pieces of this intricate, terrifying puzzle fall into place. The uncle, he whispered. Craven. Alastair's uncle. My heart pounded in my chest. Craven. The very man who had been a trusted confidant to Alastair, the man who had warned Ava against coddling weakness. He had been Alastair's partner in the espionage ring, a man with a murky past and a dark secret. He had been there that night, at the Everhart estate. He had seen everything. He had seen Sterling Vance take the brooch, and in a moment of panic, he had poisoned him. Not to get the brooch, but to silence him, to keep him from revealing the truth about Alastair. The realization was a punch to the gut. The man who was supposed to be a protector, a family friend, was the very architect of this insidious plot. He was the real traitor, the one who had been profiting from Alastair's secrets for years. And now, he was after me. He would stop at nothing to silence me, to keep his secret buried forever. The game was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. And I had a feeling that the final showdown was going to be the most dangerous of all. Chapter 6. The Imperial Bank was a mausoleum of wealth, its marble halls echoing with the quiet rustle of banknotes and the hushed whispers of deals being made. I stood at the teller's window, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, a forged letter of attorney from the Blackwood estate clutched in my hand. Inspector Robinson, bless his bumbling soul, had been a surprising ally. After our conversation, he had used his police connections to track down the Imperial Bank's records, confirming that a safe deposit box was indeed held under Alastair Blackwood's name. I had convinced him to follow me, a silent, watchful shadow, promising him that this was our chance to get the evidence we needed to bring down Craven once and for all. Alastair Blackwood's safe deposit box, I said to the teller, my voice calm and confident. I have the key and the necessary authorization. The teller, a prim man with spectacles perched on his nose, eyed me with suspicion. I'm sorry, madam, but the box has already been accessed. Just this morning, in fact. A cold dread washed over me. I had been too slow. Craven had anticipated my move. He knew I had the pieces of the puzzle, and he was one step ahead, emptying the box of its secrets before I could get to them. I didn't panic. Panic was for lesser minds. And who, may I ask, accessed it? I said, my voice as smooth as silk. The teller's face paled. I'm afraid I can't reveal that information, madam. It's confidential. Is it? I purred, my gaze unwavering. Or is it the person who has a long-standing relationship with this bank, a man who has been a frequent visitor for years, a man whose connections run deep and whose secrets run deeper? The teller's hands trembled. He was a small man, easily intimidated. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. I know who it was. I just need to confirm it. And if you refuse, I will personally see to it that your name is dragged through every newspaper in Melbourne, right alongside his. You don't want to be implicated in a murder, do you? He swallowed hard. It was Mr. Craven. He came in a few hours ago. He said he was retrieving some family documents. He looked very agitated. A slow smile spread across my face. He had taken the bait. Craven hadn't just taken the contents of the box. He had betrayed his agitation, confirming my suspicions. He was a desperate man, a cornered animal. And cornered animals always make mistakes. I thanked the teller, my voice a model of politeness, and turned to leave. Just as I reached the bank's heavy oak doors, I felt a sharp, metallic object press against my back. Don't move, Miss Fisher, a familiar, icy voice murmured in my ear. I believe you have something that belongs to me. It was Craven. He had been waiting for me. He had anticipated that I would come here, that I would try to find the truth. He had been watching me, a silent, unseen predator. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic beat of fear and exhilaration. The game was reaching its crescendo. I remained still, my hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The safe deposit box. Craven? Empty. I'm afraid. You were too quick for me. I know, he hissed, his voice filled with a chilling triumph. And now, I'm going to finish what I started. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Miss Fisher. The world can't know the truth about Alistair's little, extracurricular activities. It would ruin everything. He was supposed to be a hero, not a pawn in my game. But now you know. And now you must die. Just as he said the last word, the sound of a gun cocking echoed through the cavernous hall. Craven froze, his hand still pressed against my back. Put the gun down, Craven. Inspector Robinson's voice boomed from the shadows, surprisingly steady and authoritative. The game is over. Craven cursed under his breath, his plans unraveling before his very eyes. He had been so focused on me, he hadn't noticed my silent accomplice. Robinson emerged from behind a large potted plant, his service revolver aimed squarely at Craven's chest. The tables had turned. The hunter had become the hunted. Craven, seeing that he was trapped, made one last, desperate move. He grabbed me, his hand a suffocating vice around my throat, and used me as a shield. Move and she dies, he snarled. But I was not a damsel in distress. I was Phryne Fisher. I had lived a life of danger, and I was not about to let a cowardly man with a gun get the best of me. My foot shot out, a swift kick to his shin, and as he yelped in pain, I ducked out of his grip. The bank's silent halls erupted in a cacophony of sound. A gunshot rang out, and Craven staggered, a look of shock and disbelief on his face. He had shot himself. In his haste to escape, in his terror of being caught, he had stumbled, and the bullet from his own gun had found its mark. As he crumpled to the ground, a small, worn piece of paper fell from his hand. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly. It was a note, scrawled in a frantic hand. The plans are in the vault. The vault is in the old sewer system, beneath the Everhart ballroom. The last thing he hid. He knows they are coming for him. He said, "It's all over, my love." It was a final message from Alistair to his uncle, a confession of his last hiding place, a grim testament to the fact that he was indeed a man on the run, a man who had known his time was up. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a traitor. He was a pawn, a man who had been used and betrayed by his own family. And the plans he had hidden, the plans that had gotten Sterling Vance killed, and almost gotten me killed, were still out there. The mystery was solved, but the truth was more complex and tragic than I could have ever imagined. The widow's secret wasn't about a poisoning. It was about betrayal, corruption, and a web of secrets that stretched back to the war. And now, armed with the final piece of the puzzle, I knew that the real story, the full truth, was waiting for me in the dark, forgotten tunnels beneath the Everhart estate. The investigation was over, but the story of the widow's secret, of Alistair's final gambit, was just beginning. The final chapter closes on a chilling note, leaving us to wonder, what will Phryne do with the secret she has unearthed? Will she be able to use the information in Alistair's final note to find the lost plans and expose Craven's true motivations? Or will the ghosts of a war long past come back to haunt her? If you enjoyed this glamorous glimpse into a world of 1920s high society mystery and espionage, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Join our community of fellow detectives and plot analysts. The next chapter in this thrilling adventure is just around the corner, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think the plans in the old sewer system are? Do you believe Phryne is safe? Or is she in even greater danger now that she has all the pieces of the puzzle? Your theories could be the key to cracking the next big case. See you next time. And as always, happy sleuthing.